You know, the topic of Japan has come up repeatedly. I've talked about it. Barbarossa has to an extent. It's been talked about on, well, even AVFM, and certainly in the media. The Young Turks, whom I can't stand, I especially can't stand Anna Kasparian and Cenk, whatever his last name is, Ugric, I'm not sure. I dislike them intensely. But they talk about this quite frequently. And I'll be posting links to all the things I'm talking about below. But in their latest On Japan episode, if you wish to call it that, they talk about, well, essentially the sexlessness of Japan. Now, I don't know, I can't confirm the veracity of these studies, but one statistic, or two rather, or one giant statistic that's bandied about often is that 45% of Japanese women despise sex, and 25% of men do as well. Now, like I said, if you have direct access to this data, I'd love to see it, but despise is a strong word. In any event, on the Young Turks, they rant on about the need for people, they need to have sex, they need to interact. You see, Japan represents a revolution in humanity in many ways. People don't really understand what's going on there because there are just multifactorial causes involved. It's not simply a case of, as people in the West would like to claim, some of the people, oh, it's just feminism. Feminism has very little to do with Japan. Feminism really never influenced Japan all that much. Far more relevant to all the things occurring in Japan is the cultural historical background, the fact that Japan for centuries and centuries had been a society based on the principles of Neo-Confucianism, mixed in with their own unique forms of etiquette, a shame-based society where failure to honor your promises and obligations, in some cases, for some classes of people, both women and men, led to committing seppuku, which is the ritual slitting or slicing of the stomach. You might have seen that before in Japanese films. And in general, a geographical issue as well. I mean, the fact that Japan is constantly beset by earthquakes and tsunamis and is an island as well. These all contribute to what's going on, believe it or not. And, of course, the economy. Since the late 90s, Japan has been in slow but rather inexorable economic decline. And these all contribute to the state of things as they are now. The cultural, historical background, the geographical isolation, the environmental hazards, and the economic states. It's a confluence of factors. But what's much more important than these, what I would describe as proximate causes, is a descriptive look at what's happening. It's not just men. Women don't have interest in it very much either anymore. Women, as 45% of women don't have sex and have no interest in sex. And if you look at some of the articles that I'm linking, you'll see that most of the women just want to go on with their own interests, you know, fashion, silly stuff like that. And mind you, I consider fashion one of the greatest wastes of human caloric energy on the planet, but, yeah, go figure. It doesn't surprise you. So women are doing their own thing, and men are doing their own thing. And if you watch the Vice episode, which I'll be posting below, you also see, of course, that sex and everything associated with heterosexual interaction has been commodified. You can go to a cuddle cafe. There are host and hostess bars. Both women and men patronize such host or hostess bars. Outright prostitution, and of course the virtual video realization of some of these desires. So the list is endless. But what's really happening? It's a little bit more complicated than all of the things I've been talking about. Yes, the confluence of factors, proximate causes, but as I've talked about so many times, look at Japan. It's one of the most mechanized countries in the world. And one result of mechanization we've observed time and again is that Women, of course, want to, well, are no longer interested in being tied down to the household. Now, one thing the Young Turks cite, which may or may not be accurate in terms of causal explanation, is that there's no such thing as maternity leave. In Japan, if you're a woman and you want to get knocked up, then forget about a career. I say, tough luck. Still, this tends supposedly to discourage women from getting married. Apparently, 90% of women feel this way, that this would infringe upon their career opportunities. And men who are working themselves to death, dropping dead of heart attacks in their late 30s and early 40s, well, they're not interested in that either. But what's really going on is something that is reflective of our basic biology far more than anything else. You see, when mechanization is strong enough, when the mechanization effect is powerful enough, there are so many other opportunities in life and things and activities that both men and women, can engage in and focus on, that the whole sexual mystique loses its charm to both sexes. You see, this has been said many times, and people don't like hearing it, but there is absolutely nothing save reproductive needs that unites the human female, and the human male. They are very much, people speak of alienation, even in this country, in the United States. I don't live in the United States, but they speak of the fact that the sexes are sort of alienated from each other. That's because we are aliens. Quite frankly, at the end of the day, a man only needs a woman for her vagina in a very strict biological sense, and a woman likewise, of course, the resources he provides, but needs his sperm. That's it. We have different interests, we have different brains, different physiologies, and certainly our reproductive strategies are completely different, leading to completely different sets of behavior. We are not in each other's natural partners, and what you're seeing in Japan is a direct manifestation of this fact. Why do young children gravitate to their own sex? Well, it's because, barring the sexual interaction that will come later, that's how we function. That's how we work. Men tend to have similar interests to each other, obviously similar mentalities, whereas women tend to have similar interests to each other and similar mentalities. This is nature working. We are not meant for each other. There's no mystic bond between men and women, and the reason why we've had this unbroken chain of relationships in the past between men and women is quite simple. Propagation of DNA, procreation is the only reason, and the environment was a lot more difficult to live in, and the environment was much less conducive to each person doing his or her own thing. And so they banded together grudgingly, reproduced, and made the best of it for the sake of their offspring. Only for that reason. No other reason. That's the only reason men and women have to even find common ground, is inseminating eggs, getting pregnant, and raising offspring. That's it. There's nothing else that men and women have in common. Nothing. We have vastly different interests. Our brains function differently. People rant on about how women, even now, are not involved in STEM fields: science, technology, engineering, mathematics. They have the opportunities. And they're claiming they're discouraged from. They're not. They're not naturally inclined towards that. That's the way it is. I don't know how many more years need to pass till people realize this. But men are, generally speaking. We were never meant for each other in any sense but a reproductive sense. There's no mystic bond. There's no real friendship between men and women. All there is sex and reproduction, and that's it. And in Japan, we're seeing, with the loss of interest in sex, due to the mechanization effect, due to all of the wondrous things you can do in life that don't necessarily necessitate copulation, that the sexes are in fact alienated from each other, as it would be in a natural state where reproduction is not the primary driving force behind it all. That's what we're seeing in Japan. That's the reality of sexless Japan. The fact that men and women really have nothing in common and really don't need each other in any sense, purely biologically speaking, apart from reproduction, and they each do their own thing. And is it any wonder that Japan, being as mechanized as it is in many ways at the forefront of robotics technology and, mind you, artificial wombs, with goat embryos being grown and bred. Well, bred. What they have now is quite advanced. They have a goat fetus in a tank of amniotic fluid. This, believe it or not, could well be the future for all of humanity. And this is why we need to think about things like the artificial womb, because the more the mechanization effect takes hold across the globe, less and presumably some sector or large portions of the population lose interest in sexual relations in general, because it's a lot of work and effort for very little reward. We will need advanced reproductive technology, because yes, reproduction needs to take place to continue the propagation of the species. Some people will continue to fuck and breed, but there will be continuing diminished numbers in both sexes, particularly in societies such as Japan. I'm interested to see what's going to happen with South Korea. It's slightly different, but also not too dissimilar. But yes, this is a result of a mechanized world which offers people many more opportunities other than just breeding, and a direct result of our biology. I mean, I'm sorry to bring the bad news to you and to wake some of you up, but men and women have nothing in common. We're not friends. We're not partners. In fact, at least in a biological, reproductive sense, we're almost adversaries. In fact, we are adversaries. We have completely different strategies regarding reproduction, each sex, both the man and the woman, trying to get the best of the other. Example, man running around insemining as many women as possible. That was possible back in the day. He won, genetically speaking, evolutionary speaking. He didn't have to take care of the children, but some of those children would have survived to pass on his genetic lineage. Or, in the case of a woman, chaining a man to his obligations, same thing. Or in the more advanced case of the modern Western world, I mean, this is that phenomenon of divorce and child support. This is simply the female reproductive strategy in hyperbolic overdrive, essentially. So the news, for those of you who don't know, is that men and women are not anything to each other than biological pairs, if you will, that for the time being necessitate each other's respective sexual organs for the purposes of reproduction. Not partners, simply it's a pairing, but not partners. And the pairing is very, very weak. That's the reality that we're facing. A fact that very few people want to come to terms with, repairing relations with women. They never were broken to begin with. They were always what they were, what you're seeing now. Men and women have nothing in common with each other. We have nothing in common with women. The only thing women are to us are reproductive vessels, and vice versa. The only thing we are to women are sperm donors and ATMs, and that's the way it is. And if the loss of interest in reproduction is there, then all forms of relations, barring, hi, let me buy this item at this shop, will dissipate into nothingness. Anyway, I'm about to exceed my limit, so thank you very much